Hello, my name is Jordan Huffman, and I am with the Donaldson Hermitage Neighborhood Association. Today, we will be discussing the upcoming budget for the metropolitan Nashville government. Our city faces a challenge like it never has before, and we are not alone. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee's best case scenario for the 2020 fiscal year is a loss of around $5 billion in revenue. Nashville itself projects a loss of up to $500 million over the next year. Now more than ever, it is important for transparency in our government. We appreciate Council Member Jeff Syracuse from District 15 for upholding this ideal and joining us today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing good. Thank you. Trying to stay sane during all this,
Amen. I hear you.
So last night was a long one for you and your colleagues. Can you walk us through what happened last night during the Metro Council meeting and where we stand right now in the budget process?
Sure. So last night was the public hearing for the budget. So a second reading. And we have the operating budget, which is one piece of legislation. And then we have the tax rate, which is the other. Of course, they obviously go together. The public hearing meeting last night was the longest meeting in council history.
Wow.
I walked through my door about 5:30 this morning. So most of that, 95% of that, I would say, of everybody who called in, hundreds of people, was based on the events that occurred over the last week and a half or so, and especially last weekend. And a lot of motivated neighbors that had one major message for us, of course, in thinking about terms of equity and fairness and empowering marginalized communities and racism and whatnot. A lot of it was around defunding public safety, basically, and putting those dollars into social programs that lift people up. The most of the comments we got were from the broad perspective there. I think one of the biggest takeaways I had from last night, I'll give you two. One is, of course, the technological limitations that we had. You either had to call in telephonically, which had limitations in of itself there, or if you did come down to council, which some people who couldn't even get in because the phones were backed up, they actually came down to council then. And social distancing, the whole thing. So obviously that just slows down the process in of itself. But with all of the events that happened last week and this past weekend, people were definitely motivated to come and let us know what they think about what their priorities are for the budget. The challenge we're going to have between now and the end of the month, I think, is a lot of education about the operating budget. And I'll give you one example. And before I do, so the third and final reading of the budget will be in 2 weeks. So the June 16th meeting. And so at that time, we will have had, I believe there will be 3 substitute budgets. I think 3. And within each of those, between now and then, council members could file amendments to those. So on third and final reading, which the budget is amendable on third and final reading, we are going to have to take up each substitute. And then within each substitute, there could be a number of amendments. Last year, I believe we had 4 potential substitute budgets and anywhere from 5 to 10 amendments per substitute. So you go through each substitute, amendments A through F, well, you go through and maybe you vote yes on A, C, and E, and so it gets a laborious process for sure. But that's where we will be on the 16th. As it stands now, we basically have 2 proposals before us. I know there's a third. Councilman Glover has got a proposal that I believe is a 20% tax rate increase. We have one that is Mayor Cooper's, of course. I guess that would be a 4th option. But as far as substitutes go, there's about 3. So you have the dollar option, you have Mayor Cooper.
Mhm.
Councilmember Mendez, who chairs Budget and Finance, will have two potential substitutes. One that is taking the dollar increase and rearranging where it then goes to fund education a little more, fund arts a little more, and whatnot, and finds a few extra savings. The other option is actually going a little higher to $1.06. And then we get to really fund teachers and their pay increases that we have continuously, unfortunately, not kept our word on, that we said we were going to do. And each year, teachers don't get their step increases or whatnot. It's the same thing for all Metro employees, quite honestly, also. So there is that substitute option to go up just a little higher that would then allow us to keep our promise of step raises. So if you go from $1 to $1.06, an extra $3 a month for an average home of $250,000 to $300,000. So I'm sensitive of all tax increases for sure. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's where we are procedurally right now.
In regards to the Mendez and the Cooper plans, I know that there's some differences depending on where you live in the city. Could you talk about those a little bit?
Sure. So of course, going back to the inception of Metro, when we had two taxing districts, right? The General Services District, which is the entire county, and then you had, because remember, we're city-county combination, so that's where it comes from, the two different taxing districts. The Urban Services District is basically lays on top of the GSD, if you will, and you get an additional, it's 40 cents, so right now it's the USD rate is $3.15. If we choose the dollar increase, it'd go up to $4.15. So, and with that, you get trash service, recycle, and street lights. So yes, there will be an increase to both, but generally everything comes from the General Services District, and the USD is the additional that gives those additional services.
Okay, great. Where do you stand right now on those three budgets? Are you planning on any amendments to any of them?
They're all difficult. I don't have any particular amendments right now. And quite honestly, I try to avoid them because it gets down to so little dollars. And I know that like each nonprofit or each, like the Latin American or Tennessee Latin American Chamber, or the Black Chamber, or the Nashville Area Hispanic Chamber, the LGBT Chamber, in the past, they've all gotten a small allocation. And so that's been cut, in the different budgets, and one puts them back and whatnot. I try not to get into all that, and pet projects, things like that. When you get down to the third reading of the budget, we get so many different amendments. Unless I'm going to get it in there and have broad support from it from the get-go, I'm not going to do that. So no, I generally don't have amendments that I tried to do. I've learned, especially through my first term, of going from where we were as being the it city with all the money to where we are now with the challenges, and it weighs on us when you have 40 members who are trying to nitpick at the budget. I like to try to get to just the broad support for where we're headed. As far as where I land on the substitutes, well, as it stands, it's going to be at least $1 in increase, I think. We haven't seen Councilman Glover's proposal yet. I've just heard that it's a 20% tax rate increase. And so we don't yet know, well, if you're going to cut, then cut revenue, then where is it coming from on the expense side? So we don't know. Where I've kind of drawn the line for me is that I don't want to furlough or let employees go. I think it's very unfair, beyond unfair, that we have time and time again not honored our commitment to our employees, and it's gotten to a point where it's costing us. Whether it's private business or public business, there's HR, and it costs money to hire people, to train them, to get them in the right spots. And so what we've come up against at this point is that we'll hire teachers, right, and police officers and whatnot. But you know what? They'll take that training and they'll go to a surrounding county where it's higher pay, perhaps better benefits, and less hassle. I want to be able to recruit and retain the best and the brightest. And unless we're investing in our employees, ultimately it's costing us. And as far as I know, people try to equate government to business. It's not the same. That's a conversation in of itself. But there's a number of unknowns with coronavirus or whatnot, right? Will we have a resurgence and whatnot? I'm hoping and being hopeful and faithful that we won't have a huge resurgence, hopefully, and that we will be rebounding. If we were to let employees go effective July 1, basically, we would, within a matter of months, have to hire them back. I think the process would cost us. So council can't actually decide to fire anybody or furlough employees. We give it a budget that that department has, and that department head has to make their own decisions. I don't want to give those departments that choice. Quite honestly, and I know you'll hear from other folks, well, Metro spends too much. The budget's too big, cut it. Quite honestly, like I say, for now entering my 5th year of talking to employees and department heads, parks, libraries, arts, public works, they're all cut to the bone, quite honestly. There's nothing left to cut there. And that's tough when, people have different opinions on what is essential. We can cut that. We don't need to worry about that. Who cares about this? Where I draw the line for me is employees. So if Councilman Glover's proposal has something that is going to basically force a department head to have to lay folks off, it's not healthy for Nashville. So I will be going for the dollar rate likely. I do like Councilman Mendez's rearranging of the dollar a bit so that it does put some dollars back to ensure the step raises for teachers. So that's where I am. It's a hard pill to swallow, I know, because on the other side, people are saying, of course, you couldn't come up with a tax raise at the worst possible time in the universe, yes. Which of course is absolutely true. What I have to think about when it comes to tax rate is not just now, but the government operates on and on and on. We're going to get through coronavirus, and I've got to think about where we're headed, not just now, but over the next year or two. In fact, next year is the reappraisal process all over again. If we look back at one of the things that got us into this mess, which is the 2017 reassessment, was the biggest one-time 4-year increase in Metro's history. So that means that the rate had to come way down, and we're sitting with the lowest tax rate in Metro's history. I think the intent back in 2017 was that let's see if all this growth will push us through without having a rate increase. The reality is, here we are. We've learned over the past few years, we should have nudged that rate up in 2017. Had we done that, we wouldn't be sitting in this position right now with looking at the dollar jump. I don't think that 415 in the USD is an unreasonable rate. What gives me heartburn, of course, is that dollar jump. Government operates best when it's slow and steady wins the race, not the big swings back and forth.
Yeah. Plus, it's always easy to Monday morning quarterback, right?
Yes. No, for sure. So I'm thinking ahead to next year. Even if the growth between 17 and 2021 is not as much as 2013 to 2017, I think it's going to be still substantial. So what that means is, by state law, it has to be a revenue neutral process. Value goes up, rate comes down, And then are we going to nudge it up next year? Well, those are the things I'm thinking about now as we make decisions about how we get back to some fiscal stability. So that's certainly something I'm thinking about.
Absolutely. Well, it's never a bad thing to be looking forward. If we did raise our property tax to, let's say, the dollar, where would that put us compared to other cities around Tennessee?
Sure. Still the lowest, believe it or not. And I don't know on this thing if I can show you a document if you want a visual, but I can send it to you so you can send it out to folks.
Yeah.
But I have a graph, a line graph that shows the tax rate for the top 4 cities in Tennessee over the last 25 years. And it shows how, it shows policy decisions basically of the tax rate over the last 25 years. And when we've come down, reassessment, we go up a little bit. But the bottom line is we've done a pretty good job over the past 25 years of kind of keeping that rate steady and consistent, and both from transparency, but also predictable. In order for businesses and for individuals to budget themselves, well, if government is going way out, they're way down and way up, that's not helpful to us. So what's interesting about that graph chart that I have in 2017, it shows that rate just tanking. And over the past 2 years, it's been right there. And even with that dollar rate, we're still below the other 3 cities. So it's not always an apples to apples comparison, but it is an important comparison that would still be one of the lowest taxed counties across Tennessee from a property tax perspective.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. Yeah, and shoot me that graph, and we'll get that attached to your interview, and folks can check that out too.
Great, cool. I'll do that.
Yeah, awesome. So just you were talking about looking forward. Where do you see the city of Nashville in 5 years from where we are right now?
Sure, excellent question. We have to, like I say, we're headed towards this dollar increase this year. What happens next year is going to be very important. And of course, there are some unknowns. With the coronavirus impact, we don't yet fully know what our revenue estimates are going to be for next year. So it's one of the challenges that we have. Tax bills don't go out until October. So we're having discussions about, by law, we have to set a tax rate by July 1. But it will be possible for us to then look at in August, end of August, to see where we are. Are we really coming back, or are we getting a resurgence, or what? If so, could we look at then adjusting the tax rate? I would love to be able to bring it down if we say, hey, revenues are really starting to come back. Conventions are coming back. The tourism economy is coming back. So we're going to try to take a look at that, I think, by the end of August. But then next year, we have to have a successfully implemented reassessment process. One of the issues that we had in 2017 was that you had a lot of folks that appealed their assessment. And so that goes then before the Board of Equalization. If you don't like what the Metro Board of Equalization says, then you can go to the state board. So there's a whole process there. There's a number of commercial businesses, Opry Mills being one of them, who was successful in appealing their assessment, and they ended up paying less tax than they did in 2013. We got to be careful of that and make sure that that doesn't happen. So if we have a successfully implemented reassessment process next year, and we have this rate increase this year, we always have to control spending. But by next year, by fiscal budget 22, we should be back to the ability of funding essential services the way that they need to be. Public safety, education, those critical things. Public works. We're having to we were going to do the twice a month recycling, and so certain things we had to pull back. Of course, I would see that as a non-essential thing that that we can go without for now, for sure. But there are things that I think would really add value to folks that they're not getting right now, and our departments are pretty strapped. Libraries, parks, even just maintenance at parks. There's so much deferred maintenance at parks. People tell me every year, it's finally, hopefully the rain's out of here. It's paving season because we're in the warmer weather. I get this every year. Why can't I get my roads paved? Well, the paving dollars have to go to every district. And so we only have so much to go around.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Yeah.
We should be, to answer your question, by next year, if we do things right, by FY22 budget, we should be able to hopefully breathe a little sigh of relief, not have so much budget constraints, and then be really supporting our employees and teachers and first responders.
It would definitely be nice to get to that spot. I know that you would definitely second that.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Council Member Syracuse, really appreciate you joining us today. You're the first in our series.
All right.
A lot of good questions. You've highlighted one of the budget proposals with Councilman Glover, who we don't know a lot about it. We're going to have him on here shortly, so definitely going to be asking him some questions about that.
I'll be watching. I'll learn something.
Yep, awesome. All right, everybody, thank you very much for attending. We look forward to seeing with you again.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it. Take care.